What if I had to navigate an ever-increasing culture that was so diverse, that was coupled with political correctness? Just saying. What if I made so much money that I was able to become isolated, not needing anybody, having strong opinions because nobody challenged me? Or what if I was on the other side of that equation and I didn't have position or money, and I spent my days looking for food, shelter, and personal safety? The point is this: rich or poor, what if I became so overwhelmed with my day-to-day realities that I shifted to autopilot, I relied on quick fixes to get me through, and this became the way I lived my life? And I thought, what if the people of Israel kept the little gods around just in case the one true God didn't show up? You know, plan B. Many of you know that I had surgery a few months ago, and the doctors told me I needed 2 weeks to be still and quiet. And I don't do well with still, and I do even worse with being quiet, right? So I was good, I did it, and the way I managed this was watching daytime television. And after a couple of days of this, I began to wonder whether or not I had enough car insurance. I wondered if my identity had been stolen. After a few more days, at the time, I wasn't sure whether the Democrats or the Republicans were going to strip me of my health insurance. And honestly, folks, after a while, I even began to wonder if I had prostate problems. So it seems to be a human tendency to have plan Bs. What are yours? For some, it might be working 7 days a week. 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, just in case God's financial provision isn't enough. For others, it might be quietly abusing prescription drugs, just in case God's grace and mercy aren't enough to numb the emotional pain. And for others, it might be seeking illicit relationships outside of marriage, just in case that spouse God gave you doesn't satisfy every whim and desire that you have. Simply stated, plan B is any idol, anything that distracts you or points your hearts and minds away from the one true God who has promised to care and provide for you. But the question is this: do we dare believe him? Parents, moms, take just a minute and think about our teenagers. Unfortunately for them, we're usually in tune with their hearts, and sometimes we can see a train wreck coming. We talk to them about the importance of considering their actions, not making the mistakes that could alter the course of their lives, about disobedience that could take away their very freedom. And we want them to listen because we love them and we're looking out for their welfare. And our hearts break when they reject that. And like a loving parent, God offered his people options long before the fall of Jerusalem, but he needed for them to trust him too. Jeremiah 21:8-10 says this: "Furthermore, tell the people, this is what the Lord says. See, I am setting before you the way of life and the way of truth. Whoever stays in this city will die by the sword, famine, or plague. But whoever goes out and surrenders to the Babylonians who are besieging you will live. He will escape with his life. I have determined to do this city harm and not good, declares the Lord. It will be given into the hands of the king of Babylon, and he will destroy it by fire." So, paraphrased, God said, "Do it my way. Trust me with your circumstances, with the very details of your lives, even when it doesn't make sense, even when it doesn't feel good, and even when you don't agree." And despite God's ultimate judgment on Jerusalem, he was still there for them, offering them guidance and wisdom all along the way. But it was their decision whether or not they were going to respond to him along the way. And indeed, the Babylonians did come not once but twice to take people from Jerusalem, and guess who they took? They took those that they deemed most valuable to them because they wanted to bring people back to enhance their own society. They took the best soldiers. They took the best artisans. They took the best looking women. So who was left in Jerusalem? Those that were deemed less valuable and less useful. Those who were left alone and unprotected. Those with no voice. And Jeremiah wrote letters to those who had been taken captive in Babylon. Listen to what he wrote. "Build houses and live in them, and plant gardens and eat their produce. Take wives, have children, and multiply. Seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for it's in its welfare that you will have welfare." And in verses 10 through 14, "When 70 years have been completed for Babylon, I will visit you and fulfill my good word to you, declares the Lord. For I know the plans I have for you, plans for welfare and not for calamity, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you search for me with" what? You know the verse? "With all of your hearts. Then I will be found by you." You see, even in dark circumstances, in God's plan to leave with the Babylonians was to build homes, marry, have children, prosper. Even living in their consequences of sin, to do it God's way was to go toward hope and provision. But it required that they trust him with what? All of their hearts, with the very details of their lives. Trust. People in any generation have a problem with this. I do too. Why? Usually it's because of disappointment. It's because of what life has taught us through experiences that were not optimal. And as I mentioned before, people in any time period are just people, usually trying to do the best they can. And many times along the way, we all get overwhelmed by our circumstances. We lose our way and we opt for lesser things. We shut down. We vow to do it ourselves because nobody else is going to do it for us. And like the Hebrew people thousands of years ago, we too have a tendency to become self-reliant. Why? I think it's to protect ourselves. Because we're afraid God won't show up. And this is what God says about self-sufficiency. Jeremiah 17, 5 and 6. "Cursed are those who put their trust in mere humans, who rely on human strength and turn their hearts away from the Lord. That man will not see prosperity when it comes." And when we operate in self-reliance over time, we systematically silence the voice that God instilled in us, that was originally designed in us to call out to him for his care and provision. From our need, from our dependence. In the first chapter of Lamentations, Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, pours out his heart to the Lord as he takes in the ultimate destruction of Jerusalem. He needs for the reader to look. He needs for the reader to see what he sees and to share in his sorrow. He needs for the reader to see the desperate woman, a rebellious Jerusalem in the rubble after Babylon has set her on fire. He needs for the reader to see those left behind in horrible conditions, the aftermath of disaster. It's the aftermath of life decisions.